I'm Rachel Harrison, 32, and I've spent 5 years climbing the ranks at TechVision while my brother Jason cruised through prestigious startups with an Ivy League degree and a superiority complex. At our family's Easter dinner last Sunday, he decided to mock my career path in front of everyone, saying not everyone can handle a real career in tech. What he didn't know was that my company had just acquired his, and Grandma Eleanor knew everything. Before I continue the story of sibling rivalry turned corporate showdown, let me know where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button if you enjoy stories about family drama with a side of sweet, unexpected justice. Growing up in suburban Massachusetts, technology was always at the center of our household. My parents weren't developers themselves, but my dad worked in IT sales and my mom taught computer literacy at the local high school. They filled our home with the latest gadgets they could afford, believing that technological fluency would be crucial for their children's futures. They weren't wrong. I was 10 when I got my first computer, a hand-me-down desktop that Dad brought home from work when his company upgraded their systems. It wasn't new or fancy, but to me, it was magical. While other kids were playing outside, I was taking apart programs, figuring out how things worked, and teaching myself basic coding from library books. My bedroom walls gradually became covered with printouts of code snippets and flowcharts instead of boy band posters. Jason was 2 years older and seemed to absorb technical concepts effortlessly. Where I would spend hours troubleshooting a problem, he'd walk by, glance at my screen, and point out a solution in seconds. "You're overcomplicating it, Ratch," he'd say with that smirk I grew to resent. It's really simple if you understand the fundamentals. By high school, our paths were diverging in subtle ways. Jason was the coding prodigy, building impressive projects that won science fairs and caught the attention of college recruiters. I was more drawn to how people interacted with technology, the user experience, the practical applications, the business side of tech. But in our family, hardcore programming was considered the real tech path. When college application time came, Jason was recruited by Stanford with a partial scholarship for computer engineering. My parents were ecstatic, planning a special dinner where we all wore Stanford red. 6 months later, when I announced my acceptance to a less prestigious state university for computer science, my parents congratulated me with a quick cake after dinner. The contrast wasn't intentional, but it stung nevertheless. "State's not bad," Jason said, patting my shoulder. "Their program is more hands-on. Probably better for your learning style anyway." College only widened the gap between us. Jason thrived in the competitive Silicon Valley-adjacent environment, interning at Google his sophomore year and at a hot AI startup his junior year. His social media was filled with photos of hackathons, tech conferences, and networking events with industry celebrities. Meanwhile, I was working part-time at the campus IT help desk, struggling through algorithms classes and wondering if I'd made a mistake. After graduation, Jason landed a 6-figure position at Rapid-Scale Technologies, a cloud computing company that was the darling of venture capitalists at the time. He moved into a sleek apartment in San Francisco's Soma district and bought a Tesla with his signing bonus. At family gatherings, he'd dominate conversations with stories about his company's valuation, the famous investors he'd met, and the revolutionary products they were developing. "What's new with you, Rachel?" relatives would ask after Jason's monologues. "Still job hunting," I'd mutter during those first difficult months. Later it became, "I'm working at a small web development agency," which never prompted the follow-up questions that Jason's career did. The undermining was constant but subtle. At Thanksgiving my first year post-college, Jason examined the website I'd helped develop for a local business. "Interesting choice of framework," he said, scrolling through my code. "Most serious developers moved away from this last year. But it's good for beginners, very forgiving." At Christmas the following year, when I mentioned applying for a product manager position, he chuckled. "Product management is where they put people who can't code well enough to be engineers, but want to stay in tech." Mom and Dad laughed uncomfortably while I pushed food around my plate. My breakthrough came unexpectedly. After 3 years of working at increasingly larger agencies and building my portfolio, I applied to TechVision, an emerging company focused on AI-driven business solutions. They weren't as well known as RapidScale, but they had a reputation for innovation and a collaborative culture. During my interview, instead of focusing exclusively on technical skills, they asked about my approach to user problems and business challenges. For once, my broader perspective was valued. 2 rounds later, I was hired as a junior product manager. TechVision was different from the traditional tech companies Jason had worked for. Our CEO, Meredith Foster, believed in breaking down silos between departments. Engineers worked directly with designers and product managers from day one of each project. We had fewer ping-pong tables and free snacks than Jason's workplace, but we had a more diverse workforce and a clearer mission, making AI accessible to businesses of all sizes. Over 5 years, I thrived in this environment, rising from junior product manager to senior and then to team lead for our enterprise solutions division. My salary gradually approached Jason's, though he'd never know it, and I built a reputation as someone who could translate between technical and business stakeholders. Meanwhile, Jason continued job hopping for prestige and salary bumps. RapidScale to Nexus Technologies to Quantum Dynamics to his current position at Datasphere, each move accompanied by Facebook posts about exciting new challenges and LinkedIn updates that garnered hundreds of congratulatory comments. What wasn't visible in those polished social media posts was the growing instability in his career. Over brunches with our parents, I'd hear snippets, a product launch delayed, a round of funding that fell through, a reorganization that diminished his team's importance. But in family gatherings, Jason maintained his tech superiority complex. Backend infrastructure is where the real innovation happens, he said at last Christmas, dismissing my work on user experience. Front-end and product stuff is just making things pretty for clients who don't know any better. 6 months ago, I was assigned to lead TechVision's largest project to date, evaluating potential acquisitions as part of our expansion strategy. We were looking for companies with complementary technology that we could integrate into our ecosystem. I spent weeks analyzing financial reports, technology stacks, and corporate cultures of various candidates. One company stood out, Datasphere. Their data processing technology would perfectly complement our AI models, potentially cutting our development time in half for new products. When I presented my findings to the executive team, they were impressed. Due diligence began immediately. It wasn't until the final phase of the acquisition process that I discovered the connection. I was reviewing the organizational chart of Datasphere when I saw it. Jason Harrison, Senior Backend Architect. My brother worked for the company we were about to acquire. For a moment, I considered disclosing the relationship. But what would that achieve? I hadn't been involved in the decision to pursue Datasphere specifically. That came from the executive team based on the company's technical assets. I hadn't known Jason worked there when I recommended them, and now the deal was practically finalized. 2 weeks before Easter, our CEO called a confidential meeting with the leadership team. The Datasphere acquisition is moving forward, she announced. We'll be retaining about 60% of their engineering talent, but we need to make some tough decisions about redundant positions. As the lists of retain and release employees appeared on screen, I felt my stomach drop. There, on the release list, was my brother's name. The rationale was sound. We already had senior architects covering his specialty, and his projects overlapped with our existing infrastructure. But still, it was my brother. I said nothing in the meeting. What could I say? That we should keep an employee because he was related to me? That would be unprofessional and potentially unethical. Besides, Jason had always landed on his feet before. With his resume, he'd find another position quickly. But as Easter approached and the acquisition announcement loomed, a knot formed in my stomach. Jason didn't know yet. The employees wouldn't be notified until the following week. and he had no idea that his little sister's company was the one taking over. Easter has always been a major celebration in the Harrison family. Mom's side is Catholic, Dad's is Protestant, and they compromised by embracing all the secular traditions with extra enthusiasm. Our childhood home in Lexington would transform each April with pastel decorations, chocolate eggs hidden in improbable places, and the scent of Mom's special glazed hem wafting through every room. As adults, Jason and I dutifully returned each year for the gathering that now included extended family, family friends, and occasionally coworkers who couldn't make it home to their own families. Mom coordinated the event with military precision, assigning dishes to attendees and planning activities weeks in advance. The dynamic between our parents and us had evolved in subtle ways over the years. Dad, a practical man with a fondness for technology sales metrics, had always connected more easily with Jason's concrete engineering achievements. Mom, who taught people to overcome their fear of computers, appreciated my focus on the human side of tech. They loved us equally, I never doubted that, but their understanding of our careers was filtered through their own experiences. Grandma Eleanor was different. Mom's mother had been a bookkeeper for a manufacturing company in the 1960s, teaching herself computer systems when the company modernized while male colleagues resisted the change. She had no patience for professional arrogance and had always seen through Jason's posturing. "Your brother talks a big game," she told me once when I was feeling particularly overshadowed. "But remember, Rachel, the loudest voice in the room is rarely the wisest." She'd become my greatest ally at family gatherings, often redirecting conversations when Jason dominated or asking pointed questions about my work when others forgot to inquire. The week before Easter, I helped Mom with preparations via FaceTime. She propped her iPad on the kitchen counter as she planned the menu. "Jason says he's bringing tiramisu from that Italian place near his apartment," she said. "And he's bringing Melissa. Things must be getting serious." Melissa was Jason's girlfriend of 6 months, a UX designer he'd met at a tech conference. The irony wasn't lost on me. He dated someone in the field he often dismissed as superficial. "That's great," I said, trying to sound enthusiastic. "I'm looking forward to meeting her." "And how about you, honey? Bringing anyone special this year?" I laughed. "Just me, Mom. Work's been too busy for dating." I didn't mention that work involved dismantling her son's company. My phone buzzed with a text from Jason while I was still on with Mom. "Driving up Saturday afternoon. Save me some deviled eggs this year, you egg hog." The casual tone suggested he had no idea about the acquisition. I texted back a teasing response with a deviled egg emoji, guilt gnawing at my insides. The drive to my parents' house that Saturday morning was beautiful but tense. New England spring was in full effect. Daffodils lined the highway, trees sprouted pale green buds, and the sky was a perfect blue. I rolled down the windows of my modest Subaru, so different from Jason's Tesla, and tried to clear my head. I thought about the years growing up in the white colonial house I was heading toward. Jason teaching me to ride a bike. Me helping him with English homework. The silly songs we made up about our neighbors. When had competition replaced collaboration? When had his condescension become so normal that I expected it? Mom greeted me with a flower-covered hug when I arrived, ushering me into the familiar chaos of pre-holiday preparations. Dad was in the backyard, setting up the egg hunt for the younger cousins, and various relatives were already arriving with dishes and decoration contributions. "Rachel." My cousin Abby rushed over with her 3-year-old daughter Emma in tow. "Thank God you're here." Mom's arguing with Aunt Patricia about whether deviled eggs need paprika, and it's getting heated. I laughed and followed her to the kitchen, where I greeted various aunts, uncles, and family friends with hugs and quick catch-ups. Everyone asked about work, but in the general way people do. "How's the job going?" Not expecting detailed answers. I gave vague responses about exciting new projects and quickly turned questions back to them. Jason arrived 2 hours later, making an entrance with Melissa and a large bakery box. He'd grown a fashionable beard since Christmas and wore a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my entire outfit. Melissa was stunning, tall, with perfectly highlighted hair and the kind of effortless style that actually requires significant effort. The prodigal son returns, Dad announced, embracing Jason with a hearty back slap. Jason's smile seemed wider than usual, his greeting more effusive. There was something performative about his cheer that only someone who had grown up with him would notice. He hugged me briefly, whispering, "Looking good, Ratch," before moving on to greet Grandma Eleanor, who observed him with her usual shrewd expression. During the pre-dinner gift exchange, another Harrison tradition, small Easter presents for immediate family, Jason was unusually generous. He gave Mom crystal champagne flutes, Dad an expensive smartwatch, and me a high-end wireless charging station. "Wow, thanks," I said, genuinely surprised. "This is really nice." "Only the best for my little sis," he replied with a wink. "I know how you're always complaining about your devices dying." As we helped prepare the dining room, I caught snippets of Jason's conversations with relatives. He was talking about Datasphere's revolutionary approach and impending growth phase. Each overheard comment made me more uncomfortable. In the kitchen, I helped Mom arrange deviled eggs on her special ceramic egg plate. "Jason seems extra upbeat today," I commented casually. Mom beamed. "He told me they're expecting big news at his company. Some kind of investment or partnership. He didn't want to jinx it by saying too much." My stomach twisted. I focused intently on placing each egg just so, avoiding Mom's eyes. From the living room, I could hear Jason holding court. The thing about back-end infrastructure is that it's invisible to most users, but it's what separates the tech companies that will survive from those that won't. "Fascinating," Uncle Steve responded, though his tone suggested otherwise. I caught Grandma Eleanor watching me from her seat at the kitchen table. Her eyes, still sharp at 83, missed nothing. "You're quiet today, Rachel," she observed. "Work stress following you home?" "Something like that," I admitted. She patted my hand. "Family gatherings have a way of bringing out old patterns. Just remember who you are now, not who you were told you were." With those cryptic words, she shuffled off to direct the placement of her signature Easter bread on the buffet table, leaving me to wonder how much she somehow knew. Mom's Easter dinner was a masterpiece of traditional favorites and creative additions. The dining room table extended to its full length with both leaves inserted, groaned under the weight of a glazed ham, roast leg of lamb, scalloped potatoes, 3 types of vegetable sides, fresh rolls, and, of course, the deviled eggs that Jason and I had competed for since childhood. The seating arrangement, Mom's careful diplomatic work, placed me directly across from Jason and Melissa, with Grandma Eleanor to my right and Cousin Abby to my left. Mom and Dad sat at the heads of the table, beaming at the assembled family. "Before we start," Dad announced, raising his wine glass, "I want to thank everyone for being here. Family is what matters most, and having both our children home makes this holiday perfect." Glasses clinked as everyone echoed his sentiment. I caught Jason's eye and gave him a small smile, which he returned with a broader one. For a moment, it felt like the old days, before careers and competition complicated everything. The first half hour of dinner passed pleasantly. Melissa charmed everyone by asking thoughtful questions about family photos displayed around the house. Uncle Steve entertained us with stories about his recent fishing trip. Aunt Patricia detailed her garden plans with excruciating specificity. Work wasn't mentioned. Then Uncle Steve, always the one to wade into potentially controversial topics, turned to Jason. "So I hear you're doing some impressive things in the tech world. Your mom's been bragging about both her kids' successes." Jason swallowed his bite of ham and smiled. "It's been an exciting year at Datasphere. We're positioned to make some major industry moves." "What exactly does your company do?" Aunt Patricia asked. "Linda's son works in computers too, something with the Google." Jason launched into his well-rehearsed explanation of data processing frameworks and cloud infrastructure, using analogies that were clearly designed to make complex concepts accessible, but somehow still managed to sound condescending. And Rachel, Uncle Steve pivoted. Diane mentioned you're in tech too? Before I could answer, Jason jumped in. Rachel's on the product side at TechVision. More focused on how things look than how they work. He smiled as if he'd paid me a compliment. Actually, I corrected gently, I lead the Enterprise Solutions division. We integrate AI technologies into business operations systems. Which is important work, Jason added, cutting a piece of lamb. Someone needs to make the real programming accessible to business people. Rachel's always been good with the soft skills. I noticed Melissa shift uncomfortably beside him, shooting him a look that he missed or ignored. Both sound impressive to me, Mom interjected quickly. We're so proud of both our children. Dad nodded enthusiastically. The tech industry's lucky to have the Harrison siblings. Grandma Eleanor watched the exchange silently, her fork paused midway to her mouth. The conversation moved on to Cousin Abby's new house, but the tension lingered. I noticed Jason refilling his wine glass more frequently than usual. By his third glass, his gestures had become more expansive, his voice slightly louder. When discussion turned to recent news about data privacy concerns at major tech companies, Jason scoffed. Most users don't understand the real technical issues, he said, swirling his wine. They get caught up in interface glitches or cosmetic problems, not realizing that the real vulnerabilities are in back-end systems. That sounds like what Rachel works with, doesn't it? Grandma Eleanor asked innocently. Jason chuckled. Not exactly, Grandma. Rachel makes things user-friendly. I build the engines that make those interfaces actually function. I thought about the acquisition report I'd written, detailing how DataSphere's engines were becoming outdated compared to newer architectures, including those developed by my team. I took a long sip of water and said nothing. As Mom served her traditional Easter coconut cake, Jason steered the conversation toward recent industry news. There have been some interesting consolidations lately. Smaller companies getting absorbed by the big fish. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. Isn't that bad for innovation? Asked Dad, always concerned about monopolies. Depends, Jason replied. Some companies deserve to be acquired because they can't compete on their own merit. Others are acquiring companies because they can't innovate internally. The jab was subtle enough that only I caught its potential double meaning. Was it possible he knew something about the acquisition? There have been some unfortunate layoffs in tech recently, Aunt Patricia commented, having read something about it in her Facebook feed. Linda's son says it's getting very unstable. The table fell silent for a beat too long. I stared at my cake, feeling every eye move between Jason and me. Job stability is certainly important, Mom said with forced lightness. Thankfully, both our children are invaluable to their companies. Right, dears? Jason smiled, the wine evident in his slightly unfocused gaze. Some roles are certainly more essential than others when companies need to cut costs. And what makes a role essential, in your professional opinion? Grandma Eleanor asked, her voice deceptively mild. I braced myself, sensing what was coming. Jason set down his wine glass and leaned forward, a familiar gleam in his eye. I'd seen it countless times growing up, when he was about to demolish my argument in a debate, or demonstrate why his solution to a problem was superior. Technical expertise is irreplaceable, he began, speaking to the whole table but looking at me. Companies can find people to manage projects or design user experiences anywhere. But deep technical knowledge, real engineering talent, that's what tech companies can't afford to lose. The table shifted uncomfortably. Even those who didn't work in tech could sense the competitive undercurrent. So sis, he continued, his tone lightening artificially, still playing with spreadsheets and mock-ups instead of getting your hands dirty with actual code. Dad cleared his throat. Jason, everyone's contribution is valuable. Of course, Dad, Jason interrupted with a dismissive wave. I'm just saying there's a difference between being adjacent to technology and being at its core. I felt heat rising in my cheeks, but kept my expression neutral. Every role in a successful tech company is important, I replied evenly. Engineers, designers, product managers, sales, we all need each other. Jason smirked. That's a diplomatic answer. Very on brand for product management. Maybe we should, Mom began, but Jason wasn't finished. The truth is, he continued, voice rising slightly, not everyone can handle a real career in tech. The constant learning, the pressure to innovate, the technical depth required. It's intense. That's why there are support roles for people who prefer a less demanding path. The table went completely silent. I felt my pulse in my ears as I stared at my brother, speechless at the public dismissal of my entire career. Melissa looked mortified, staring at her plate. Dad was frowning into his wine glass, while Mom's eyes darted anxiously between her children. My mind raced through possible responses. I could list my accomplishments, the successful products I'd launched, the teams I'd built, the revenue I'd generated. I could point out that Jason had changed companies 4 times while I'd steadily advanced at one. I could mention that my spreadsheets and mock-ups had transformed how businesses implemented AI solutions. But each potential comeback felt petty and defensive, and none would address the years of accumulated condescension that had led to this moment. As I struggled to find words, I noticed Grandma Eleanor's expression changing from observant to determined. She set down her fork with deliberate precision, the small clink drawing everyone's attention. Rachel, she said calmly, looking directly at me, is that why your company just bought out his and laid him off? The silence that followed was absolute. I could hear the wall clock ticking in the adjacent living room. Jason's face transformed in slow motion, confusion, then shock, then disbelief. What? He finally managed, looking between Grandma and me. All eyes turned to me. I sat frozen, desperately trying to understand how Grandma Eleanor knew about an acquisition that hadn't even been announced publicly. I began, not sure what to say. That's ridiculous, Jason interrupted, but uncertainty had replaced his earlier confidence. Datasphere isn't being acquired. We're in a growth phase. Where did you hear that, Grandma? Eleanor shrugged slightly. I read the business section. And I have friends whose children work in finance. Word gets around. Rachel. Mom's voice was small. Do you know something about this? I took a deep breath. The secret was out, however it had happened. TechVision is acquiring Datasphere, I confirmed quietly. The announcement is scheduled for Tuesday. I didn't know Jason worked there until late in the process, and by then, decisions had already been made. Jason's face flushed deep red. You knew? You've known this whole time today and said nothing. I couldn't say anything, I replied, holding his gaze. It wasn't public information yet. But you knew I was being laid off? Your own brother. His voice rose with each question. Jason, Dad said warningly, not at the dinner table. No, I want to hear this. Jason stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. Did you have a part in this decision? Did you recommend they fire me? Of course not, I responded, feeling sick. The retention decisions were made by the integration team based on overlap in roles. I wasn't involved in those discussions. But you knew, he repeated, eyes flashing. You sat here listening to me talk about Datasphere's future knowing it was being dismantled. Melissa tugged gently at his sleeve. Jason, maybe we should discuss this privately. He shook her off. Did everyone know except me? Is that why you're all looking at me like that? No one knew, Mom assured him quickly. This is the first we're hearing of it too. Various relatives murmured confirmation, looking increasingly uncomfortable. Well, Jason said with a bitter laugh, isn't this perfect? Little Rachel finally one-ups her big brother. Was this your plan all along when you joined TechVision? Position yourself to destroy my career. That's enough, Dad said firmly. You know that's not true. Do I? Jason challenged. She's known about this acquisition for how long? Weeks? Months? And said nothing. I found out you worked there after we'd already targeted Datasphere, I explained, struggling to keep my voice steady. And I couldn't legally tell you. Convenient, he snapped. What would you have done in my position? I asked, my own anger finally rising. Called you with insider information? That's literally illegal, Jason. You could have warned me. He slammed his hand on the table, making the dishes jump. And you could have treated me with respect for the past decade instead of constantly implying my career was inferior to yours, I shot back, surprising myself with the outburst. But here we are. Mom made a distressed sound. Grandma Eleanor watched the exchange with unreadable eyes. I need some air, Jason announced, throwing his napkin on the table and striding toward the back door. Melissa hesitated, then followed him with an apologetic glance toward the stunned table. In the silence that followed, I became acutely aware of everyone staring at me. The weight of family judgment felt suffocating. I'm sorry for ruining dinner, I said quietly. You didn't ruin anything, Grandma Eleanor stated firmly. Sometimes truth is uncomfortable, but it's always better than pretense. Dad rubbed his forehead. Maybe someone should go talk to him. I will, I said, standing. It should be me. As I moved toward the back door, I heard relatives breaking the silence with awkward conversation attempts. Behind me, Grandma Eleanor caught my wrist gently. He needed to hear it, she whispered. And so did you. With a deep breath, I stepped outside to face my brother. I found Jason at the edge of the backyard, standing beside the old maple tree that had held our childhood swing. Melissa was with him, speaking in low, urgent tones that ceased when they noticed my approach. Her expression was a mixture of embarrassment and concern. His was pure anger. I think we need to talk, I said, stopping a few feet away from them. Now you want to talk? Jason laughed without humor. After blindsiding me in front of our entire family? I didn't know Grandma was going to say that, I replied. I'm as shocked as you are. Somehow I doubt that. He turned to face me fully. So it's true? TechVision is acquiring Datasphere. I nodded. The announcement is Tuesday. Employees will be notified Monday morning. And I'm being laid off. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. Yes, along with about 40% of the staff due to redundancies. Melissa touched Jason's arm. Maybe I should give you two some privacy. He shook his head. No, stay. Apparently, I'm the only one who's been kept in the dark, so there's no need for privacy now. She looked uncomfortable but remained beside him. How long have you known, he demanded. That TechVision was acquiring Datasphere? About 2 months. That you specifically worked there? 3 weeks. That you were on the layoff list? 10 days. He absorbed this information, jaw tightening. And you didn't think your brother deserved a heads up? It was privileged corporate information, I explained, trying to keep my voice calm. I signed NDAs, Jason. I could lose my job or even face legal consequences. Right, he scoffed. Always following the rules. Meanwhile, I get to be humiliated in front of our family. That wasn't supposed to happen, I insisted. I had no idea Grandma knew anything about it. I still don't understand how she found out. Jason ran a hand through his hair in frustration. So what? You were just going to let me find out with everyone else on Monday? Sorry, bro, business is business. What was I supposed to do? I asked, my own frustration mounting. If our roles were reversed, what would you have done? He didn't answer immediately, which told me everything. This isn't just about the acquisition, I continued, seizing the moment of honesty. This is about years of you treating my career like it's somehow less valuable or impressive than yours. That's not. It is, I cut him off. Every family gathering, every conversation about work, you find ways to minimize what I do. Support roles. Not real tech. You've been doing it since college. Melissa shifted uncomfortably. Jason, she's not entirely wrong. You do talk about product roles that way. He looked betrayed. I'm just stating facts about the industry. Core engineering roles are harder to fill. That's not personal. It feels personal when it's your sister you're constantly diminishing, I replied. Do you have any idea what it's like to have your accomplishments dismissed by someone who's supposed to support you? Oh, please, he snapped. You've been succeeding your whole life. Top of your class, teacher's pet, parents' pride and joy. Don't play the victim. I stared at him in genuine confusion. What are you talking about? You were the golden child. Stanford, Google internship, 6-figure starting salary while I was working at the campus help desk. And everyone expected me to live up to it, he exclaimed. Do you know how much pressure that is? To always be the technical genius, to always have the next big career move. Meanwhile, you got to carve your own path with zero expectations. We stood there in stunned silence, each confronting a version of our shared history that didn't match our own memories. I've been jealous of you, he admitted finally, voice quieter. How you found your niche and stuck with it. Built something steadily while I kept chasing the next impressive name on my resume. The confession knocked the wind out of my anger. You've been jealous of me? I've spent my entire career feeling like I was playing catch-up to you. Melissa looked between us with dawning understanding. You two have never actually talked about this before, have you? We both shook our heads. Jason sighed heavily and sat down on the old wooden bench nearby. I've been struggling at Datasphere for months, he confessed. The company's been mismanaged. The technology's falling behind. I've been job hunting since January. I didn't know that, I said softly, sitting beside him. Of course not. I wouldn't admit failure to the family. Especially not to you, now that you're doing so well. He looked at me sideways. Your company really saw enough value in Datasphere to acquire it? The core technology is sound, I explained. It's the business model and implementation that weren't working. Our integration team has plans to rebuild around the essential architecture. He nodded slowly. Which doesn't include me. The decisions were made based on overlap in the existing org chart, I said. It wasn't personal. It feels pretty damn personal from where I'm sitting. We fell silent, the weight of years of competition and miscommunication hanging between us. I knew, he said suddenly. Knew what? That you worked at TechVision. When I joined Datasphere last year. I stared at him. You knew? And you never said anything. He shrugged. I didn't want to create awkwardness. 2 Harrisons in competing companies. And then when rumors of acquisition started floating around the office, I convinced myself it couldn't be your TechVision. There are several companies with similar names. So we both kept secrets, I observed. Yeah. He gave a small, rueful smile. Some siblings share clothes. We share corporate confidentiality. Despite everything, I laughed, and after a moment, he joined me. The tension didn't disappear, but it eased slightly. Melissa, who had been watching our exchange with evident relief, spoke up. Maybe we should go back inside? Your family is probably worried. Jason nodded, standing up. I owe everyone an apology for my outburst. We both do, I agreed. Rachel, he said, hesitating. For what it's worth, I am proud of what you've accomplished. I've just been too competitive to say it. Thanks, I replied, surprisingly touched. And for what it's worth, you're still one of the most brilliant engineers I know. Any company would be lucky to have you. He smiled slightly. Even yours. There might be openings in other divisions, I said cautiously. I can't promise anything, but I could ask around. I appreciate that, he replied. But maybe it's time I found my own path without riding your coattails or competing with you. We walked back to the house in a silence that felt, if not comfortable, at least less hostile than before. Inside, the family had relocated to the living room for coffee, maintaining a strained normalcy. Everything okay? Mom asked anxiously as we entered. Getting there, I answered honestly. Jason cleared his throat. I want to apologize to everyone for my behavior earlier. Finding out about business changes at a family dinner was unexpected. But I shouldn't have reacted that way. Various relatives murmured acceptance and understanding, clearly relieved that the drama appeared to be subsiding. Dad brought out board games, a traditional Easter afternoon activity, and gradually the atmosphere lightened. Jason and Melissa left earlier than planned, but our goodbye was civil, even warm. "I'll call you this week," Jason promised as we hugged briefly. "I'd like that," I replied, meaning it. As they drove away, I felt a mixture of exhaustion and strange relief. Whatever happened next with our careers and relationship, at least the years of unspoken competition were finally in the open. After most of the guests had departed, I stayed behind to help my parents clean up. The afternoon sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows as I loaded the dishwasher while Mom packed leftovers into containers. "I'm sorry about how everything unfolded," I said, breaking the comfortable silence. Mom paused, container in hand. "It wasn't your fault, Rachel. These things are complicated. Still, I hate that it created drama at your beautiful dinner." She smiled sadly. "Your father and I just want you two to be happy. The competition between you has always been there, but it seems to have gotten worse as adults. I think today might actually help with that," I reflected. "We said some things that needed to be said." "That's good." She hesitated. "Is Jason really going to be okay, job-wise?" "He's incredibly talented, Mom. He'll land on his feet." "He always does." She nodded, seemingly reassured, and returned to her task. Dad appeared with a trash bag full of crumpled napkins and Easter grass. "Your grandmother is asking for you on the back porch," he informed me. I found Grandma Eleanor seated in her favorite wicker chair, observing the backyard where Cousin Abby's kids were hunting for the few eggs they'd missed earlier. "You wanted to see me?" I sat in the chair beside her. Her eyes, faded but still sharp, examined my face. "You're wondering how I knew about the acquisition." I nodded, relieved she'd broached the subject directly. "Meredith Foster's mother and I play bridge together," she revealed with a small smile. Meredith mentioned to her mother that her brilliant young product director Rachel was handling a major acquisition. "When she described you, Doris immediately connected that you were my granddaughter." "But how did you know about Jason specifically?" "I didn't, not until today. But I've watched tech companies gobble each other up for decades. When Jason kept talking about Datasphere's bright future while you looked increasingly uncomfortable, I put the pieces together." She patted my hand. "Your face has always given you away, dear. Just like when you were 7 and broke my crystal bird." I laughed despite myself. I thought I was being so professional, keeping everything separate. "There's professional, and then there's family," she said wisely. "Sometimes the lines blur, and that's when we discover what really matters." "I feel guilty," I admitted. "About Jason losing his job, about keeping secrets." "Don't," she said firmly. "You did nothing wrong. Neither did Jason, really. You're both just caught in this strange modern world where work becomes identity." She looked thoughtful. "When I was your age, a job was something you did, not something you were. It's different now," I acknowledged. "Perhaps it shouldn't be." She gave me a meaningful look. "My generation fought so women could have careers at all. But we didn't fight so you could define your worth by them." Her words stayed with me during the drive home that evening. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of pink and gold as I mulled over the day's revelations. Jason had been jealous of me. The thought still seemed surreal after years of assuming the opposite. My phone buzzed with a text as I pulled into my apartment complex. It was from Jason. "Today was intense. Sorry again for the outburst. Maybe we could grab coffee this week and talk more? Without an audience." I smiled slightly and replied, "I'd like that. Wednesday afternoon." 3 dots appeared immediately. "Works for me." "That cafe near your office?" 3 p.m. "See you then," I confirmed. Inside my apartment, I curled up on the couch and opened my laptop, intending to prepare for Monday's announcement. Instead, I found myself looking through old family photos stored in my cloud drive. Jason and me building a snowman. Jason teaching me to code on that old desktop. Me helping him with a science fair project about website usability. When had we stopped being teammates and become competitors? Monday morning brought the official announcement. I watched from the back of the room as our CEO addressed the company, explaining the strategic acquisition of DataSphere and the integration plans. Afterward, my team peppered me with questions about what this meant for our product roadmap, our resource allocation, our competitive positioning. I answered each question professionally, not mentioning my personal connection. But throughout the day, I found myself thinking about the humans behind the corporate decision, not just Jason, but all the employees whose lives would change because of papers I had helped prepare. Tuesday's public announcement triggered a flurry of industry analysis and social media reactions. DataSphere employees received their official notices, continuation, or severance. I checked my phone repeatedly, wondering if Jason would reach out, but it remained silent. Wednesday afternoon, I arrived at the cafe early, claiming a quiet corner table. When Jason walked in at precisely 3 o'clock, I noticed he looked both tired and somehow lighter, as if a burden had been set down. "Hey," he said, sliding into the chair across from me. "Hey yourself. How are you doing?" He ordered a black coffee before answering. "It's been a weird couple of days. Getting the official notice, clearing out my desk, explaining to colleagues that no, I didn't have insider information from my sister." "I'm sorry," I said sincerely. He shrugged. "Don't be. You were right about DataSphere's management. The writing's been on the wall for months." He stirred his coffee thoughtfully. "It's actually a relief in some ways. A clean break. Have you thought about what's next?" "I've had a few calls already. Word travels fast when senior architects become available." He looked up at me. "But I'm not rushing into anything. I think I need to figure out what I actually want, not just what looks impressive." "That sounds healthy," I observed. Easter was a wake-up call in more ways than one. He hesitated. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about me dismissing your work. I didn't realize how much that affected you." "I should have said something sooner," I acknowledged, instead of letting it build up. "Why didn't you?" I considered the question carefully. "I guess I thought if I proved myself enough, eventually you'd recognize it. And I didn't want to seem petty or oversensitive." He nodded slowly. "I've been thinking about why I felt the need to position myself as the real tech person in the family. I think I was insecure about job hopping while you built something stable. About chasing titles and salaries while you focused on work you actually seemed to enjoy. We're more alike than we realize," I said with a small smile. "Both trying to prove something, just in different ways. Dad would call it the Harrison competitive streak. Mom would call it being stubborn as mules." We both laughed, and for a moment, it felt like the easy camaraderie of our childhood. "I have some contacts at Levant Technologies," I offered tentatively. "They're doing interesting work in distributed systems. If you're interested, I could put in a word." "I'd appreciate that," he said, surprising me with his lack of hesitation. "And maybe I could look over that integration plan you mentioned for DataSphere's architecture. Off the record, of course. I know where the technical debt is buried." "That would be incredibly helpful," I admitted. We spent the next hour talking shop, really talking, not competing. I explained TechVision's vision for DataSphere's technology, and he offered insights that would save my team weeks of discovery work. He described the projects he'd found most fulfilling, and I suggested companies that might value that specific expertise. As we parted ways outside the cafe, I felt a sense of possibility that had been absent from our relationship for years. "Mom's birthday dinner is next month," he reminded me. "I'll be there, I promised." "Let's make it less dramatic than Easter," he suggested with a wry smile. "Deal." We hugged briefly, and as I watched him walk toward his car, I realized Grandma Eleanor had been right. Jobs came and went, companies acquired and divested, careers rose and fell. But family was the constant if you were willing to do the work. 1 month after the explosive Easter dinner, Jason and I met for lunch near the waterfront. Spring had fully blossomed into early summer, and the outdoor cafe was filled with people enjoying the sunshine. My brother arrived in casual clothes rather than his usual tech executive attire, jeans, and a simple button-down that made him look more relaxed than I'd seen him in years. "How was the interview at Levant?" I asked after we'd ordered. "Really good, actually." His face brightened. "They're doing fascinating work with distributed systems, and they seem to value experience over pedigree. Second round is next week." "That's great." "Their CTO is brilliant. I met her at a conference last year." "You mentioned that when you recommended me," he said with a knowing smile. "Name-dropping my little sister to get ahead. How the tables have turned." We both laughed, the joke landing comfortably where once it might have sparked tension. "I've been using those architecture insights you shared," I told him. "The integration team says it's saving them weeks of work. My boss thinks I'm a genius for spotting those dependency issues." "Take the credit," Jason said generously. "Consider it my parting gift to Datasphere." Over the past month, we'd established a new pattern of communication, regular texts, occasional calls, and professional connections freely shared without the competitive edge that had previously defined our interactions. It wasn't perfect. Old habits sometimes emerged in unconscious ways. But each time, we recognized them more quickly and course-corrected with increasing grace. "Mom's birthday dinner is this Saturday," I remarked as our food arrived. "Are you bringing Melissa?" "Yes. She's been surprisingly supportive through all this." He looked slightly embarrassed. "She actually called me out on some of my tech elitism after Easter. Said she'd noticed it for months, but wasn't sure how to bring it up." "I like her more and more," I grinned. "She likes you too." Said it's refreshing to meet someone in tech who doesn't immediately ask if she just makes things look pretty. He winced at his own past behavior. "I've been doing some reflecting on that. Growth looks good on you, Jason." "How should we handle Saturday?" he asked, returning to the original topic. "It's the first time everyone will be together since Easter." "I think we just act normal," I suggested. "Show them that we've moved past it. They'll follow our lead. And if Grandma Eleanor starts dropping corporate intelligence again, we thank her for her service and change the subject," I laughed. We spent the remainder of lunch planning a joint gift for Mom, a digital photo frame we would both contribute pictures to, spanning decades of family memories. The collaboration felt natural in a way that had been missing for years. Saturday arrived clear and warm. Jason and I had coordinated beforehand, arriving at our parents' house simultaneously to present our unified gift. Mom was delighted, especially when we revealed we'd spent an afternoon together selecting the photos. "This is the best present," she declared, flipping through images of family vacations, graduations, and candid moments. Having my children getting along again. The smaller gathering, just immediate family, Grandma Eleanor, and Melissa, felt intimate and relaxed. Dad grilled on the patio while Mom told stories about her students' amusing technology misconceptions. The Easter drama went unmentioned until after dinner, when Grandma Eleanor cornered Jason and me in the kitchen as we loaded the dishwasher. "You two seem better," she observed bluntly. "We are," Jason confirmed. "We've been talking more." "Actually talking, not just competing." "Good." She nodded approvingly. "Life's too short for family feuds, especially over something as fleeting as jobs." "You were right," I admitted, about the lines blurring between professional and personal. "I've been thinking a lot about that." "Well, don't overthink it," she advised pragmatically. "Just do better going forward." The evening concluded with board games, a Harrison family tradition for birthdays as well as holidays. The competition remained, but it was lighthearted, focused on the game rather than underlying insecurities. When Jason won at Scrabble, always his strong suit, I congratulated him sincerely. When I dominated at Pictionary, he high-fived me without reservation. The following weeks brought more positive developments. Jason received an offer from Levant Technologies for a senior architecture role that excited him far more than his position at Datasphere had. Meanwhile, my team successfully integrated the valuable parts of Datasphere's technology, leading to a promotion for me to Director of Enterprise Solutions. We celebrated both milestones over dinner, this time with our respective teams joining us. Watching Jason chat amicably with my colleagues, offering insights without condescension, showing genuine interest in their product work, I felt a surge of pride in how far we'd come. "Your brother's nothing like you described," my deputy director Samantha whispered during a lull in the conversation. "I thought he was going to be this arrogant tech bro." "He's changed," I replied simply. "We both have." 3 months after Easter, our family gathered again for Dad's birthday. The ease between Jason and me was no longer noteworthy. It had become our new normal. We discussed work freely, each genuinely interested in the other's projects and challenges. When technical topics arose, we naturally complemented each other's perspectives rather than competing for authority. "Remember when you two couldn't be in the same room without turning everything into a competition?" Dad remarked as we helped him set up the new smart home system we'd jointly purchased for his birthday. "We've grown up, Dad," Jason replied, handing me the correct cable without being asked. "Better late than never," I added with a smile. That evening, as family and friends mingled in the backyard, Grandma Eleanor found me by the dessert table. "I'm proud of you," she said without preamble. "Both of you." "For figuring things out with Jason?" "For remembering what matters." She looked over to where Jason was showing Dad a feature on his new system. "Success is empty if you can't share it with the people you love." "When did you get so wise, Grandma?" I teased. "Around the time you were born," she retorted with a wink. "I've just been waiting for you to catch up." As summer turned to fall, Jason and I established a monthly sibling dinner, just the two of us, alternating who chose the restaurant. Sometimes we talked about work, sometimes about family, sometimes about the random interests and thoughts that siblings normally share. The career competition that had defined our relationship for so long gradually became just one facet of a much richer connection. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if TechVision hadn't acquired Datasphere?" Jason asked during one such dinner in October. "If we'd just continued on our separate paths?" I considered the question carefully. "I think we would have eventually had some kind of reckoning. The tension was unsustainable. But it might have taken years," he acknowledged, "or never happened at all." So, in a weird way, the acquisition was a good thing. "Cosmic corporate karma," he grinned. "The universe forcing us to grow up." "I'll drink to that," I laughed, raising my glass. We clinked glasses, the sound ringing clear in the quiet restaurant. In that moment, I felt a profound gratitude for the painful but necessary Easter confrontation that had broken years of unhealthy patterns. Our careers would continue to evolve, perhaps converge again, perhaps diverge completely, but our relationship now had a foundation strong enough to withstand those changes. "You know," Jason said thoughtfully, "for all our focus on technology and innovation, the most complicated system we ever had to debug was our own relationship." "True," I agreed. "And unlike code, there's no Stack Overflow for sibling rivalry. Just trial and error," he added. "And a willingness to rewrite the program when it's not working." As we walked out into the cool autumn evening, I reflected on how far we'd come since that tense Easter dinner. The acquisition that had seemed like a personal and professional catastrophe had ultimately led to something invaluable, a genuine relationship with my brother based on mutual respect rather than competition. Some lessons can only be learned through difficult experiences. Sometimes the most painful moments create the greatest opportunities for growth. And sometimes what feels like professional failure opens the door to personal success of a far more meaningful kind. Has someone in your family ever dismissed your career or accomplishments? How did you handle it? Share your experiences in the comments below and don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the story. I've found that our greatest growth often comes from our most challenging relationships, and I'd love to hear how that's been true in your life. Thank you for listening, and remember, success looks different for everyone, but it always tastes sweeter when shared with those who truly see and value you.